This is Black Unbounden. And tonight, we don't just tell a story. We peel back the polished surface of privilege and show you what dignity looks like when it walks quietly into a room wearing sneakers, carrying nothing but truth. And this story begins with a name. Abigail. Abigail stood at the edge of the lavish marble foyer of the Briarwood estate, like a raindrop lost in an ocean that refused to notice it. Her sneakers, still damp from the morning drizzle, squeaked against the flawless marble, a sound too ordinary for a house that lived and breathed extravagance. A heavy backpack hung low across her shoulder, its fabric frayed, its zippers tugging against the weight of textbooks and crumpled lecture notes from her classes at Cal State. She leaned against the wall, small and still, as the parade of designer shoes clicked past her, red soles whispering stories of money, privilege, and arrogance. Press suits floated by, their wearers clutching champagne flutes and conversations she wasn't meant to hear. Not one pair of eyes met hers. Not one polite nod. She wasn't simply unseen. She was treated like a blemish on perfection of their curated world. She had arrived 10 minutes early, obedient to a clock that had taught her punctuality was respect. The mansion, sprawling like a crown over the Beverly Glen Hills, was alive with staff rushing like ants in pressed black uniforms. One of them, a tall blonde woman with a clipboard clutched like a scepter, gave Abigail a glance as thin as a blade. "The children will be ready soon." "Wait by the door," she said, her voice clipped, efficient, dismissive. Abigail smiled gently, nodded, and obeyed. That was her way. She never argued. She never pressed back. She simply waited. But inside her chest, where her heartbeat had grown accustomed to carrying storms, a rumble began to gather. This was not her first house call. Abigail had been babysitting for nearly 2 years, balancing odd jobs between lectures, research papers, and the long commutes that carved hours out her days. She knew mansions like this, houses swollen with wealth, laughter that didn't sound real, and eyes that always looked down, never across. But something about this house felt different, not in its architecture, but in its air. The coldness here wasn't from marble floors or air conditioning. It was in the eyes, stares that clung to her like static electricity, heavy with judgment, shallow in their assessment, dismissive in their assumption. She wasn't Abigail Marshall here. She wasn't a student, a daughter, a young woman with dreams and dignity. She was just the babysitter. They said it with smirks, with winks, with shrugs of indifference. They said it like she was furniture, an accessory, something to be tolerated but never acknowledged. She had heard whispers like these before, in smaller houses, in richer ones, in whispered conversations when they thought she couldn't hear. The children were sweet, though, 2 young boys with wild hair and restless curiosity. They clung to her presence not because she was a help, but because she played with them as though their imaginations mattered. When one of them tripped and his shoelace came loose, she knelt down, steady hands tying the knot. He leaned close, whispering with innocence and cruelty only children carry. "Are you poor?" Abigail didn't flinch. She met his gaze, eyes soft and unbroken, and said, "Not in the ways that matter." And she smiled. The boy blinked, confused, and then returned her smile. But inside, Abigail knew where he had learned the question. Kids repeat what they hear. Somewhere in this house, behind glasses of wine and marble countertops, someone had planted that seed. The days stretched long, as the parents hosted their charity gala in the back gardens. Abigail stayed with the boys inside. She played board games on Persian rugs, colored dragons with crayons, taught them how to fold paper airplanes from discarded stock market printouts left carelessly by a maid. They laughed as a plane soared across the living room, crumpling in midair, and for a while Abigail forgot the stares and the whispers, until the door creaked open. Douglas Winthrop entered, the man of the house, hedge fund executive. A face splashed across financial magazines, his grin practiced, his glass of wine trembling with arrogance. His eyes landed on the mess of paper and crayons scattered across the carpet. His expression narrowed, disdain thinly veiled. "Boys," he said, his voice laced with superiority, "don't make a mess in front of help." That word, help, dripped from his tongue like spoiled fruit, sour, rotten. The older boy scrambled to gather the crayons, his face flushed with shame. But Abigail stood, slowly, calmly, straightening until her eyes met his. She didn't speak immediately. Silence itself became her shield, and when she did speak, her voice was gentle but unshaken. "Of course, sir. I'll have him clean up immediately." Douglas's smirk widened. To him, it was victory. He turned on his heel, glass in hand, leaving her in the wake of his arrogance. He never knew he had walked away from a contest he hadn't even realized existed. The hours crawled on, each moment a needle, each glance another cut. The caterer who told her to use the back entranced next time. A guest who mistook her for a server and asked her for more ice. The teenage daughter of another guest who snapped a photo of her and posted it with the caption, "House help aesthetic." Abigail in the blurred background, captured like scenery. But Abigail only smiled. Not because she was weak, not because she accepted it, but because she was waiting. The gala swelled to life outside. Champagne poured, violins sang, laughter rang false beneath chandeliers. Guests clustered in corners, trading investments and opportunities like playing cards. At precisely 6:15, a man tapped the microphone. The hum of chatter stilled. Eyes turned to the small stage at the edge of the garden. "Ladies and gentlemen," the program director announced, "please welcome our keynote speaker for the evening, a man who has led with vision, with integrity, with unmatched brilliance, a man who needs no introduction, but deserves one nonetheless. General Victor Marshall." The name landed heavy. A hush rippled across the garden. Chairs scraped against stone as people sat up straighter. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The name carried weight, decades of service, pages of history. He stepped forward, broad-shouldered, tall, his presence a storm wrapped in stillness. Not in military garb now, but a tailored suit that did nothing to soften the authority etched into his bones. Applause erupted, but when he spoke, the applause died instantly. His voice carried the kind of power that didn't ask for silence. It commanded it. He didn't begin with numbers, not with strategies. He began with a story. 25 years ago, he said, I came home from deployment to find my wife gone. She had left me with a newborn child. No note, no explanation, just absence. I was lost. I was scared. I was a soldier who had faced battlefields, but nothing compared to that kind of emptiness. And then my mother stepped in. She took me and my daughter into her one-bedroom apartment in South Central. She sacrificed everything she had to keep us afloat, and she made me promise one thing, that no matter how high I climbed, I would never forget who held the ladder. The crowd leaned in. His voice pulled them closer, not with grandeur, but with truth. My daughter, he continued, his voice steady with pride, is the reason I fought every battle. She is the reason I built everything you see today. And she is here with us tonight. Please welcome my daughter, Abigail Marshall. Gasps echoed across the garden. Wine glasses tilted. Jaws slackened. Time itself seemed to pause. Even the wind quieted. Abigail stepped forward. From the shadow of their assumptions, she emerged. The same girl they had called just the babysitter. The same girl who had been told to use the back door, who had been overlooked, dismissed, diminished. She walked with grace. Her simple outfit transformed into a crown of humility. Her posture regal, her steps deliberate. The marble floors that once rejected her now echoed her arrival like a drum. She passed the stunned guests, the caterers who had looked through her, the servers who had been told they were above her, the clipboard woman whose glance had cut her down to silence, and Douglas Winthrop, whose glass slipped from his hand, shattering into 100 pieces at his feet. She climbed the stage. She hugged her father, and in that embrace, the truth roared louder than any violin. The cameras flashed. The applause trickled in, hesitant, awkward, uncertain. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because in that moment, every guest knew they had been caught naked in their prejudice. General Marshall handed her the microphone. Abigail took it. She let the silence stretch, let the eyes that once pierced her now squirm beneath her gaze. And then she spoke. Good evening. Her voice was steady, strong, unshaken. I'm honored to be here, but I want to speak not as a CEO's daughter, not as a guest, not as a student, but as the girl who was judged today for wearing sneakers. as the girl who was called just the babysitter, as the girl who was asked to use the back door, as the girl who was treated like a shadow. She let the words sink. She let them choke in the throats of those who had cast them. You see, this house, this event, this world, it's built on appearances, titles, money. But the truth? None of that means anything if your heart is hollow, if your mind is closed, if your respect is conditional. I was raised by a man who taught me that no job is beneath you and no person is above you, that every soul deserves dignity, that leadership isn't about status. It's about how you treat the ones who can give you nothing in return. Her words cut through the air like a blade of light. Silence. Then one clap. Then another. And then the garden erupted into applause. Not for her name, not for her father, but for the mirror she had just held up to them all. That night, Abigail became more than a babysitter, more than a guest, more than a daughter. She became a reckoning. By morning, the photo of her and her father standing shoulder to shoulder had gone viral. Headlines raced across screens. Abigail Marshall, keynote speaker. Cal State graduate. Army general's daughter. Babysitter. But the real headline lived between the lines. They called her just a babysitter, until they found out who her father was. By then it was too late. Their masks had slipped. Their judgment had been exposed. Justice had been served. Not by revenge, not by rage, but by revelation. Because sometimes the loudest power is the quiet kind. The kind that walks in with sneakers, smiles through scorn, waits patiently for the moment to speak. And when it does, the world listens. Because respect is never demanded. It's earned. And sometimes the very ones you overlook are the ones who were always meant to change the room.